Welcome back to World History Explored. I'm your host, Adam Zane. Picture this. You're getting your DNA test results back, and you discover you're 35% Celtic, 25% Anglo-Saxon, 15% Viking, 10% Norman, and a mix of other ancient bloodlines. But here's the mind-blowing part. Every single one of those percentages tells the story of conquest, migration, love, and survival that shaped the British Isles for over 2,000 years. Today, we're diving into the most epic genetic detective story ever told. How the DNA flowing through millions of people today carries the literal blood of Celtic druids, Roman legionnaires, Viking raiders, Norman knights, and a dozen other peoples who fought, settled, and intermarried to create the nations we know as Britain and Ireland. This isn't just ancient history. This is your history, written in your genes. When colonial powers draw lines on maps and armies clash for territory, who really owns the land? The answer might be flowing through your veins right now. So grab your coffee. We're about to explore how 2,000 years of bloodlines refuse to stay buried. The Celts and pre-Celtic peoples, first masters of the Isles 600 BCE to 43 CE. Our story begins around 600 BCE with Celts, the first true masters of these islands. But here's what most people get wrong. The Celts weren't a single tribe. They were waves of related peoples from Central Europe, bringing sophisticated Hallstatt and Latin cultures. But even before the Celts, there were the Iberians, early Atlantic seafarers who linked Ireland, Brittany, and Spain. The passage graves at Newgrange and Noath show cultural connections to Iberian megaliths. Their DNA marker R1b-DF27 still links Irish populations to Spain's Basques, proving these ancient Atlantic networks. These weren't primitive barbarians. When Julius Caesar invaded Gaul in 58 BCE, he faced Celtic armies with advanced metallurgy and war chariots. The Celtic queen Boudica nearly drove Rome out of Britain in 60 CE, leading a rebellion that destroyed 3 Roman cities and killed 70,000 Romans. The Celts built massive hill forts like Maiden Castle. When Romans stormed it in 43 CE, archaeologists found skeletons with Roman ballista bolts still embedded in their spines. Their druids were the Harvard professors of their time, memorizing legal codes and histories that took 20 years to master. Romans were so terrified of druid influence, they banned the religion entirely. Modern DNA tells this story perfectly. Celtic bloodlines show haplogroup R1b-L21, the Atlantic Celtic marker, in 70 to 80% of Irish populations. The Iberian connection through R1b-DF27 proves these islands were connected to vast Atlantic trading networks thousands of years before Rome. The Picts and Northern Mysteries, 300 BCE to 843 CE. While Celts dominated most of Britain, northern Scotland belonged to the Picts, the painted people who terrified even the Romans. First recorded in the 3rd century CE, they covered themselves in tattoos and body paint, built mysterious stone circles and brochs, round towers, and launched devastating raids south of Hadrian's Wall. The Picts were fierce opponents of everyone: Romans, Anglo-Saxons, and later Vikings. At the Battle of Dún Nectaine in 685 CE, they crushed a massive Northumbrian army, stopping Anglo-Saxon expansion into Scotland forever. Their carved stones show a sophisticated culture with unique artistic traditions. But the Picts' greatest achievement was survival through adaptation. By the 9th century, they merged with incoming Gaelic Scotty to form the Kingdom of Alba, the birth of Scotland. Their DNA markers I201b, ancient Northern European lineages, mixed with Celtic R1bl21, creating the genetic foundation of Highland Scotland. The Picts didn't disappear. They became Scottish, bringing their military traditions, territorial knowledge, and artistic legacy into the emerging Scottish kingdom that would resist English conquest for centuries. 43 CE Emperor Claudius launches the largest amphibious invasion in ancient history, 40,000 professional soldiers landing on Kent's beaches. King Caradocus fought a brilliant 7-year guerrilla war before his capture. For 367 years, Rome transformed Britain completely. They built 9,000 miles of roads, many still major highways today. Londinium rose from Boudica's ashes. Bath got its famous spas. Hadrian's Wall, 73 miles of stone, marked where civilization ended and barbarism began. But here's the mind-blowing part. The Roman army wasn't just Italians. African cavalry units served on Hadrian's Wall. Archaeologists in York found tombstones of African-born officers, including one reading, "Numidia gave me life, Britain gave me death." The end came suddenly in 410 CE. Emperor Honorius sent his famous letter, "Look to your own defenses." After 4 centuries, Rome was pulling out, leaving towns abandoned and the economy collapsed. DNA evidence shows Mediterranean haplogroups like J2 and E1b1b in British populations, especially around Roman settlements. These prove Roman soldiers settled and married, leaving genetic legacies. Ireland was never conquered, but shows Roman contact through trade. Wine, glass, and metalwork found in Irish sites prove connections to the empire. The Germanic waves, Angles, Saxons, Jutes, and Frisians, 410 CE to 793 CE, 410 CE. Rome abandons Britain, and desperate Romano-British elites make a fatal decision. They invite Germanic mercenaries for protection. According to the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, Hengist and Horsa arrived in 449 CE with 3 ships. But they were advanced scouts for entire peoples. The Angles came from Denmark, settling in East Anglia and giving England its name. The Saxons from northern Germany founded Wessex, Sussex, and Essex. But the often forgotten Jutes and Frisians were equally crucial. The Jutes from Jutland founded the Kingdom of Kent and settled the Isle of Wight. The Frisians from the Netherlands were master seafarers who maintained trade networks across the North Sea. Here's why the Frisians matter. Old English and Old Frisian were so similar they were practically dialects of the same language. Frisian traders connected Anglo-Saxon England to continental Europe, bringing pottery, jewelry, and cultural influences found in Anglo-Saxon graves. What followed was ethnic replacement warfare. The Battle of Diorham in 577 CE saw West Saxons crush Celtic resistance, splitting Wales from Cornwall forever. By 600 CE, Germanic kingdoms controlled most of England. The Romano-British were killed, enslaved, or pushed west. These weren't small raids. Entire Germanic villages transplanted to Britain. They brought their gods. Woden became Wednesday, Thunor became Thursday. Even our calendar reflects conquest. The genetic proof is stark. Haplogroups R, 1BU, 106, and I1, Germanic markers, dominate eastern England but rare in Wales, Scotland, Cornwall. The takeover was so complete that Celtic languages vanished from most of England, surviving only in Western refuges where Celtic DNA also remained strong. The Norse, Northern Fury Unleashed, 793 CE to 1100 CE, 793 CE, Lindisfarne Monastery. Monks conducting morning prayers when dragon-headed longships appear. The Vikings slaughtered monks, burned the monastery, and sailed away with centuries of accumulated treasure. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle recorded it with terror. Never before has such terror appeared in Britain. In 865 CE, the great heathen army invaded, not a raid, but conquest. Led by Ragnar Lothbrok's sons, they conquered Anglo-Saxon kingdoms one by one. York became Jorvik, the Viking capital of northern England. In Ireland, Vikings founded Dublin in 841 CE. The climax came at Clontarf in 1014, where Brian Boru crushed the Viking army, but died in the fighting. By then, they'd established Ireland's major cities, Waterford, Cork, Limerick. In England, they created the Danelaw, half the country under Danish law. King Alfred barely saved Wessex at Edington in 878, pushing Vikings back, but accepting their permanent presence. DNA evidence is stunning. Haplogroups I1 and R1A-Z284 reach 40% in Orkney and Shetland, 20 to 30% in northern Scotland and eastern Ireland. Recent archaeology shows Viking women buried with Thor's hammers. Entire Scandinavian families were relocating, not just warriors raiding. The Normans and Bretons, Vikings turned French lords, 1066 CE to 1200 CE, Harold Godwinson marched 250 miles north to defeat Norwegian King Harald Hardrada at Stamford Bridge, then immediately marched 250 miles south to face William of Normandy at Hastings. The battle lasted all day. English shield walls held for hours against Norman cavalry. But William was tactical genius. He ordered feigned retreats, drawing English off their hill. When Harold fell, resistance collapsed. Here's the twist. The Normans were Vikings who'd settled in France. William was great-great-great-grandson of Rollo the Viking, but he spoke French and brought continental feudalism to England. And he didn't come alone. Alongside Norman knights came Bretons, Celtic refugees who had fled Anglo-Saxon invasions centuries earlier to settle in Brittany. The Bretons brought something special. They carried Arthurian legends back into Britain. These Celtic returnees preserved Brythonic traditions and provided crucial cavalry support at Hastings. Their DNA shows R1b-L21 and R1b-DF27, bridging Britain, Ireland, and France. The transformation was brutal. William built 500 castles in 20 years. He ordered the harrying of the North in 1069-70, killing 100,000 Anglo-Saxons. The Domesday Book shows almost every English landowner had been replaced by Normans and their Breton allies. In 1169, Normans invaded Ireland, led by Strongbow. But these Norman lords gradually became more Irish than the Irish, marrying into Gaelic families, speaking Irish, eventually fighting against English rule. The Fitzgeralds and Burkes became Irish names. Genetically, Normans show Scandinavian markers mixed with Frankish elements. Thousands of French words entered English after 1066, fundamentally changing the language. The Irish Gaels and Scotty, from Ayr to Alba, 400 CE to 1600 CE. Throughout all these invasions, the Irish Gaels maintained their identity with remarkable tenacity. They traced origins to Niall of the Nine Hostages, a legendary high king around 400 CE. DNA evidence suggests this might be real. Haplogroup R1b-M222, found across Ulster and western Scotland, could represent his descendants. Here's what's incredible. Gaels didn't just stay in Ireland. Starting in the 4th century, Gaelic clans called the Scotty migrated to western Scotland, founding Dalriada around 500 CE. These weren't peaceful settlers. They were conquering warriors who gradually pushed eastward against the Picts. The pivotal moment came when Kenneth MacAlpin, a Gaelic king with Pictish royal blood, united the Picts and Scots in 843 CE, creating the Kingdom of Alba, modern Scotland's ancestor. The Scotty brought Gaelic language, law, and culture to Scotland, literally giving the country its name. But here's what makes Gaels special. They were Europe's cultural preservers. When Rome collapsed and Europe entered the Dark Ages, Irish monasteries became libraries of Western civilization. Irish wandering scholars traveled across Europe, founding monasteries and schools from Switzerland to Kiev. Ireland wasn't just surviving, it was teaching Europe how to read again. The genetic evidence is stunning. R1b-M222 shows up across Ireland, Scotland, even Iceland, carried by Irish slaves taken by Vikings, and Normandy, brought by Irish scholars. The Gaels transformed their conquerors. Viking Irish became more Irish than Scandinavian. Norman Irish adopted Gaelic law. Its cultural resilience on an epic scale. The continental connections, Franks and others, 500 CE to 1200 CE. The story gets more complex when we consider the Franks, the Germanic tribe that founded Francia and later the Holy Roman Empire. While they didn't directly settle in Britain and Ireland, their influence was enormous. Frankish culture shaped the Normans, who brought Frankish feudalism, chivalric traditions, and military tactics to both England and Ireland. The Franks' DNA markers, R1b-U152 Alpine, R1b-U106, and I1, show up in British populations through Norman connections. Their legal traditions influenced English common law, and their cultural practices transformed medieval aristocracy. But there's an even more surprising connection. Evidence suggests small numbers of Moors, Berber, and Arab rulers from Islamic Spain may have reached Britain through Norman and Iberian trading networks. While their direct genetic impact was minimal, historical chronicles record Black Moors in Norman-era Britain, adding yet another thread to this incredible genetic tapestry. These connections remind us that medieval Britain and Ireland weren't isolated islands. They were part of vast European networks stretching from Scandinavia to the Mediterranean, from the Atlantic to Eastern Europe. Every genetic marker tells a story of movement, trade, conquest, and cultural exchange that connected these islands to the wider world. Fast forward to the 20th century, and the British Empire begins coming home through invitation and necessity. 1948, the Empire Windrush docks, with 492 Caribbean passengers responding to British government job advertisements. Britain was devastated after World War II and desperately needed workers. But reception was hostile. The 1958 Notting Hill riots saw white mobs attacking Caribbean families for 9 nights. Yet the Caribbean community transformed British culture with steel drums, reggae, and carnival celebrations, now as British as fish and chips. The 1960s to 70s brought crisis migrations. When Idi Amin expelled Uganda's entire Asian population in 1972, 27,000 people with 90 days to leave, they came to Britain with British passports. From the Indian subcontinent came Punjabi farmers, Bengali sailors, Pakistani textile workers. Many faced "No Irish, no blacks, no dogs" signs into the 1970s. These modern migrations add completely new haplogroups: R1A-Z93 from South Asia, E1B1A from West Africa. London today speaks over 300 languages, more diversity than anywhere on Earth. But here's the connection. These communities follow exactly the same patterns as ancient peoples. They're settling, adapting, intermarrying, adding their legacy to the continuing story. The Indian doctor whose grandchildren speak Yorkshire, the Nigerian family whose kids play cricket for England. This is how these islands have always worked. Conclusion: the endless story. So here's the truth about British and Irish bloodlines. There has never been pure ancestry in these islands. Every person carries genetic legacy from multiple peoples, multiple stories of migration, conquest, and survival spanning 2,000 years. Whether your DNA shows Celtic druids, Roman legionnaires, Anglo-Saxon farmers, Viking raiders, Norman knights, Gaelic poets, or modern migrants, you're part of a story thousands of years in the making. The British Isles weren't shaped by one people replacing another. They were shaped by wave after wave of peoples who became part of something larger. The Celts didn't disappear when Romans arrived. They adapted. Romans didn't vanish when Anglo-Saxons invaded. Their roads and genes remained. Each layer added to the whole. And that process continues today. The Indian engineer, Polish worker, Nigerian nurse, they're not changing British and Irish culture, they're continuing it. Because adaptation, mixture, and reinvention aren't new. They're how these societies have always worked. The DNA in your veins connects you to ancient warriors and ordinary people who made extraordinary journeys, adapted to new lands, survived everything history threw at them, and pass their inheritance to you. The most traditional thing about these islands is their openness to becoming something new while honoring what came before. What do you think? Did the Celts and Gaels shape these islands more through cultural persistence, or the Vikings and Normans through conquest? Are we living through another chapter in this ancient story? Let me know in the comments below. And if this genetic journey fascinated you, hit that like button and subscribe to World History Explored for more stories about how the past lives in our present, literally in our DNA. Until next time, keep exploring history, because it's not just something that happened to others. It's written in your genes and continuing through your choices every day. They fought, traded, and eventually merged into English identity. Each layer added to the whole rather than replacing it. And that process is still happening today. The Indian software engineer, the Polish construction worker, the Nigerian nurse, the Bangladeshi restaurant owner, they're not changing British and Irish culture, they're continuing it. Because adaptation, mixture, cultural synthesis, and constant reinvention aren't new developments in these islands. They're the entire point. They're how these societies have always worked. This genetic detective story reveals something profound about human migration and cultural development. Nations aren't built by pure bloodlines maintaining themselves in isolation. They're built by countless individuals making countless personal choices: whom to marry, where to settle, which customs to keep, which languages to speak to their children, and those individual choices, multiplied across generations, create the complex societies we inherit. The DNA flowing through your veins right now connects you not just to ancient warriors and medieval kings, but to ordinary people who made extraordinary journeys, who adapted to new lands, who preserved some traditions while creating others, who survived everything history could throw at them and passed their genetic and cultural inheritance down to you. So the next time someone talks about traditional British or Irish identity, remember that tradition itself is a story of constant change, continuous arrival, endless adaptation. The most traditional thing about these islands is their openness to becoming something new while honoring what came before. What do you think? Did the ancient Celts and Gaels shape these islands more through their cultural persistence? Or was it the later waves of Vikings and Normans who redefined everything through conquest and political transformation? Are we living through just another chapter in this ancient story, or is something fundamentally different happening in our globalized world? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if this genetic journey through 2,000 years of bloodlines fascinated you, hit that like button and subscribe to World History Explored for more stories about how the past lives on in our present, sometimes literally in our DNA. Until next time, keep exploring history, because as we've discovered today, it's not just something that happened to other people. It's written in your genes, flowing through your bloodstream, and continuing through the choices you make every single day.